Hello and welcome to Beautiful Literature with me, Teacher Martha. I am so glad that you could join me today. And like I promised last time, that we will be looking at English paper 1, and we looked at the two questions that you do first with paper 1. That is the functional writings, and we looked at briefly about it, and the cloze test. And today I would want us to look at the oral skills, because it's a critical part of paper 1, and oral skills carries 30 marks. Out of the 60, it carries 30 marks. And it's a bit extensive, it's a bit large, but the questions sum up to 30 marks, and therefore it is important for you to also prepare for it. And what I would want to do, there's so much to look into it, but what I would want to do is for us to look at just a highlight of what is expected. Later on, we will look at the details of it, but just highlighting when on this, because it has many sections, that oral skills has around 4 or 5 sections, actually more, and I would want to just mention them in passing. And just as I do that, it's important for you to ask yourself, am I comfortable with that? Do I know what that is about? So that even as you go into your revision, even as you go into your intensive and extensive study, you're able to know exactly what it is you're looking at. So let's get beginning. Started by saying that the oral skills has number 1 part is the use of homophones. Homophones is the first part of the oral skills. And of course, these questions do not come in a certain order. Actually, the examiner can mix them in whichever way. So I'm not saying that it begins this way, then this way, this way. On the oral skills, it's just a mix-up of whatever the examiner would want to test. They will not test on everything, but they will pick on different areas, depending on what they would want to test. And so therefore, the homophones are those questions that you'll be asked to identify the sounds that are the same. What sounds, what are similar? Do they sound the same? Sometimes you'll be asked to highlight what is the odd one out. I'm sure you've seen those kind of questions. You also have questions where you're told to identify the silent letters. You're also sometimes told to list the words that are rhyming. And so rhyming, silent letters, odd one out, same sounds, and so on. That is under homophones. So I'm hoping that even as you practice, kindly just look into those issues. That is under oral skills. Number 2 part of the oral skills that is in paper 1 is oral poetry. And I would want to, maybe when you're looking at paper 2, I would want to bring us the difference on the poetry in paper 1 and the poetry in paper 2. Those two are, any poem can fit in anywhere, but the questions are the ones that are very different. When it comes to oral poetry in paper 1, the questions that you're asked are purely oral. There's just testing on your oral skills. And when you come to paper 2, I will highlight how the questions go so that you're able to see the difference. Let me just, in passing, we'll not go into the details because we can do that later. Just mention to you, when it comes to oral poetry, what kind of questions will you be asked? Number 1, you can be asked, how will you say line, let's say, for example, line 3. You're asked, how would you say line 3? And so you see, you are being asked to tell us, how would you say, for example, you are performing that line, that poem, you're reciting it in front of people, or you're performing it, how would you say that line? And so therefore, we'll look at how would you say it, but those are the questions you'd be asked. The other question can be asked, how would you perform line 2 or this line or this particular line? And so the question is just, is not asking you about you realize there's a difference between how would you say and how would you perform. So when you're talking about performance, it's a totally different thing from how would you say. And in the future, we'll look at how would you do that. The other question you can be asked on oral poetry is, how is the rhythm achieved in this poem? So therefore, you need to understand about the stylistic devices and also the sound patterns and be able to identify what sound patterns are able to enhance rhythm. For example, the issues of repetition, the assonance, the consonants, and all that help us to achieve rhythm. We'll look at that later on, but that is on oral poetry, therefore. And so you can also be asked, how would you describe the rhyme scheme? Or you are told to describe the rhyme scheme in the poem. That is under oral poetry. Other times you can be asked, which words would you stress in this particular word? And for whatever reason, because they maybe their emphasis words, they are the key words there, and so on. So what is the attitude of the persona or whatever? What is the tone? What is the mood? All those questions are under oral poetry. And so therefore, when you're doing your revision, therefore in paper 1, the questions are very different from those ones in paper 2. And we will look at that and you'll be able to see the difference between that. So I encourage you that even as you do your revision, ensure that the questions you are handling as far as paper 1 is concerned have got only to do with the oral skills in poetry. The other question that we can be brought out on the other part that we look at when you're looking at paper 1, apart from oral poetry, we are looking at oral narrative. And so on this narrative, it is very, in the same way, in paper 2, we also have a narrative, but the questions in paper 1 also have got to do with just oral skills. And therefore, you will not be asked what is the economic activity, because that you'll find in paper 2. But in this paper 1, you could probably just be asked, for you to prepare your audience to listen to this narrative, what things would you need to do? How would you want to introduce it so that your audience is able to be attentive? You'll be asked, what are the speech enhancing cues that you need to use to the audience that is listening to you? If you look at that set of questions, it is very different from the ones that you find in paper 2. So basically, whatever happens in paper 1, it's oral. You're being asked, you actually need to see yourself making a presentation and be able to interact and engage your audience when you're doing that poetry, when you're doing that narrative. And so therefore, I would want to encourage you to make sure that you revise on that. And as you're revising, look at it that way. The other thing that is tested under the oral skills is the listening and speaking skills. Listening and speaking skills. And that is extensive. There are so many questions that would come under that. You'll also have the issues of stress and intonation. I'm moving a bit fast. There is issues of stress and intonation. You can be asked how to, the rising and the falling intonation. All that is in paper 1. And you asked how would you stress this word? I mean, the first syllable, the second syllable, and so on, the noun and the verb. That information will be tested on paper 1 and that under oral skills. And there's also the short forms of literature that can also be tested under there. You'll be asked about the riddles, the tongue twisters, the puns, and so on. That is tested under oral skills. And just to mention that, so basically what we are saying is that oral skills is broad, it is huge, and therefore you need to continually make sure, if you want to be comfortable with paper 1, you will need to make sure that you practice on oral skills more, even as you do that. Maybe just to mention, because another time we will look at the details of it, but this is where you are asked questions on the group discussions. What things do you need to do for you to be effective in a group discussion? It is where we talk about turn taking. How would you enhance turn taking? It's where we talk about negotiation skills. We are talking about dialogue and the telephone conversations. They are also found in these oral skills. We are talking about the field work, talking about interviews. How would you need to attend? To engage in, if you're interviewing someone, all those things. There's so much to talk about it. And therefore, I would want to encourage you to just engage on that. And just like I mentioned at the beginning of these videos, is that we have a WhatsApp group where we do more of these engagements. We have these issues going on. And so therefore, even as you watch these, I would encourage you to join the WhatsApp group. And probably from there, you're able to see some of these questions. We are able to interact one-on-one, and you're able to benefit from these. But I want to hope that out of that presentation on both the one I did earlier on the functional writings, the close test, and the oral skills, you'll be ready to do paper 1. You'll be ready to prepare for paper 1. And remember, this is not only for the Form 4s, even the Form 1s and the Form 2s. It is important for you to familiarize yourself with that information, because I think it becomes challenging when you are starting to interact with these papers in Form 1, in Form 4, and it doesn't sync very well because you are under pressure, you're in a rush, and so on. So I encourage you to just pick up paper 1 and do what concerns you. For example, you're looking at functional writings and you're doing the functional writings of your level. If you're looking at the close test, they're close tests for your level. If you're looking at the oral poetry, you've already done those sound patterns in Form 1 and Form 2. So there's so much you can do. So this is not just for the Form 3s and the Form 4s. It is cutting across. So prepare yourself, allow yourself to familiarize yourself with what is relevant and what is tested in paper 1. It becomes a bit easier. It even makes English not this big huge animal that you're not able to break. You're told to revise for English. Sometimes somebody wonders, how do I revise for English? What is there to revise? There is so much to revise, especially when you break it into the papers. You'll be able to revise. So that is it as far as paper 1 is concerned. I want to hope that you've learned something, and let's engage both on the comment section or on the WhatsApp group, whichever. If you have a question or an area that you'd really think in that paper 1 you'd want us to engage more, if there's a function or writing that you feel like you'd want us to engage more, go ahead and let me know on the comment section. I'll be willing to take it up. I'll be willing to follow it up with you, and I'll be willing to help you on the same. If there is an oral skill, an oral skill that you think you're not comfortable with, just let me know, both in the WhatsApp group and the comment section, and I will take you through that. So thank you very much. That's all for today. And in the next episode, now we go to paper 2 and have a look at what is in paper 2. But thank you very much for joining today. And remember to share with your friends wherever they are. If you like what we are sharing here, do not keep it to yourself. Just share it with other people, because sharing is caring. Thank you very much.